that surprising. But just think about this. The exact same scenario, 3 different people, and 3 completely different reactions based on who's doing the same thing, right? So we're all guilty of this stuff. I thought this was a good example of how bias works. Okay, so there are 2 good books if you want to read more about bias. One is called The Blind Spot. The other is called Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow. And it really just, thinking fast and thinking slow is about the 2 parts of your brain. The one that thinks slow is the one that is more logical, more measured. And when we think about ourselves, we think that's who we think we are. But you also have a part of your brain that thinks fast and is just more reactionary, more emotional. And the truth is the 2 work hand in hand. We tend to be emotional creatures, and we use logic to support the emotional decisions that we make. So when we think about intellect, this is the schema or the picture that we have. This is the picture of intellect. And it's important for you to be able to imagine a picture that doesn't necessarily feel natural or comfortable. What does a rocket scientist look like? Do you know who these women are? Mm-hmm. Who are they?
The ladies from NASA.
Yeah, the hidden figures, right. These are the real ladies, not the movie stars, right? So if you happen to see them on the street, in your mind, would you think rocket scientists? So I can guarantee you there's probably a schema that you've created about that. What does a librarian look like? What's your picture? What popped into your head? Somebody with glasses. Right, exactly. Yeah, are you a librarian? Okay, there we go. But you know what I'm saying? We have these pictures, and we're often not even consciously aware that they're there. So we need to challenge assumptions about who has potential, who's a good student, who's an academic, because sometimes the pictures that we have don't necessarily fit with reality. A little bit about black personalities, particularly black boys. They're constantly being misperceived. And so injuries to the collective ego can negatively impact growth. So, being born black means being born the suspect, being the picture of malnutrition, violence, crime. So a lot of negativity, unfortunately, in society around this. So just having awareness of it. And then children create ego defense mechanisms which help them to defend against disappointment. So if they're not feeling included, if they're not feeling validated or valued in a setting, they're less likely to engage and more likely to withdraw. Okay? So they engage in not learning or not engaging to protect themselves. So the deficit model assumes that some students have it and some don't. We start to sort and select, right? And then it results in a sort of favoritism for some and exclusion for others. We end up having performance that is below average, and it's a drain on achievement. But the capacity building model assumes that most students are capable, that there's development for all, it builds confidence, you end up with having more continuous improvement, and then increased achievement. So think about the students in your groups who are receiving most of the attention now. Because I guarantee you there are probably some of those imbalances are taking place. And then think about how you can creatively be flexible enough and adjust yourselves to bring those other kids back into the room. Right? And again, who you give your attention to is usually who is most like you. It's real easy to develop rapport and relationships with people who think the way you do, who look the way you do. Again, the kids with the best social skills are going to get your attention. The kids have the style that is like yours are going to get your attention. So how are you going to make sure that you're engaging with everybody else too? And then we sometimes put students into boxes based on our initial perceptions and never allow them to get out of them. So think about some of the boxes you might have formed. Who's in the troublemaker box? Who's already in the whiner box? Who's in the talkative box? Think about some of the boxes, right? And then instead of holding the kids in those boxes, help them to get out of those boxes. Do you want to say something?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I tend to like that kid with the challenge.
Good. Good. You're perfect for this role then.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, that's what's needed, right? Because, you're dealing with a challenged group of kids. Yeah. Oh, I love that. I'm going to let you guys go through this later. So, learn to survey the landscape for unconscious bias. And not just theirs, but theirs and yours. Because, again, both groups are bringing bias. Think about who's getting appreciated the most, who's always getting chosen, who's getting developed, who's getting rewarded, who has emotionally checked out already. And how are you going to help them to emotionally check back in? Okay. And then, are you seeking diverse opinions? And are you engaging all of the students? Most acts of racism are not overt. A little bit about race here. They're subtle and often unconscious, and racism is often difficult to see. This image is difficult for some people in this country to look at. And it's because of how we've been conditioned. And that conditioning came as a result of slavery. So it's important to know that history is not dead. It's alive and we carry it with us. It still is impacting dynamics today. And then think about what you know about the history of the students, because knowing something about someone is engaging. You know, sharing something about somebody's history or teaching them about their own history, bringing that into, the conversation might be a way to engage with them and get them interested in what you're trying to do and say. And then we have no difficulties at all looking at this image, right? Because we don't racialize puppies in the same way that we racialize people based on color. We don't assign negative characteristics to puppies based on color, but we do people. And then a little bit about socioeconomic status. We tend to be uncomfortable talking about class and power and how those dynamics work. We usually like to just kind of pretend that everybody's middle class because we carry a lot of stuff around class. Sometimes it's shame, embarrassment. There's a lot of discomfort around class. But everybody in here is probably going to be a different class than those kids that you're working with. And so how are you going to then cross those cultural barriers and not use your class privilege in a way that is negative, but in a way that is positive, that allows you to, bring them in. So we tend to have stereotypical views. This tends to be our stereotypical view of how we look at class. So there's a definition in here of class. I'm going to let you read that later, or classism, rather. And then a little bit about generation, because this is certainly cross-generational, right? Generation gap is a term that describes different values, attitudes between one generation and the other. So every generation inherits several old and developed some new cultural norms. And each generation wants to be oppositional to the mainstream, right? Every new group, all 8th graders, even when you were in 8th grade, want to do and be different from the adults. They want to do something different from their parents. All groups have their own jargon, their own language, their own words for love, money, sex, friends, all of that. And so while, these are different looking types of underwear, they are all still underwear and serve a purpose, right? And then my mom doesn't even wear underwear anymore, so I don't know what generation that is. She's just over it. So people who more collaborative working styles will be better cross-generationally. And I'm going to let you guys read about childhood later. All right, so this is the parent voice and the adult voice. And you could actually switch those terms with other words. But I just want you to look at how one is more authoritative and one is more engaging or collaborative. So the parent voice is insulting, and not all parents are like that, let me just say this. The adult voice seeks resolution. The parent voice is demeaning. The adult voice discusses options. The parent voice is demanding versus negotiating. The parent voice is authoritative versus non-threatening. The parent voice is directive versus factual. The parent voice is judgmental versus the adult voice, which is non-judgmental. The parent voice is advising versus questioning. And one creates a win-lose attitude, which is less engaging, and the other one creates a win-win attitude. So one exacerbates problems, and I think the other one is better at resolving problems. Yes?
I was just going to ask if anybody had this happen to them. the other mentor and I are friends, and when we were with the kids, excuse me a minute, you know, we do this kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know if you're supposed to do that or not, but you just, that's my personality. I know I touch people.
Yeah, you're touching. That's who you are.
And there was one little boy who said, "Don't touch me. Just don't touch me."
Okay.
So
that's diversity.
Yeah.
Right?
I didn't know what was going on. I just wondered if anybody else had that.
So you'll be, more aware of that, right? Because some kids want to be touched and hugged, right? And others don't. So you have to kind of flex and adapt yourself, to what the student prefers. Anybody else have that situation happen? Yeah, you have to.
Well, I would say yes. The person that I'm partnered with is retired and has been retired for quite some time, and I'm pretty new to the workforce. And so to see the way in which she interacts and the way I interact are totally different.
Interesting.
And I'm not saying that one is correct and one is wrong, but there's a huge difference. And she's able to reach kids in a certain way, and I'm able to reach others in a certain way. And so it's pretty interesting to see that power of communication happen.
Yeah, exactly. Utilize those differences, because some kids are going to respond better to her way and some your way. Absolutely. So think about what makes you uncomfortable. And not in general, but in the mentoring situation. Right? What makes you uncomfortable? What are your triggers? It's important for you to spend time thinking about that ahead of time. Have you gotten angry? Or when was the last time you got angry in a situation? What caused you to get to that point? Think about some of these questions. And then think about who are we? So who are we in this situation is who you are and what you're bringing and what the student is bringing. How much of my race, gender, culture, social norm will be positively accepted? And how much are you accepting of others? Can I safely be proactive and reactive in this setting? And then are you creating a platform so that students can do the same thing? Will I be safe enough to share my thoughts and feelings? And are you creating a safe space or a brave space where they can do the same thing? So I won't go through this whole list of questions because you have it in your workbook. But I want you to think about these things deliberately so that you have a conscious awareness of where you are. So culturally intelligent behaviors include this whole list of dispositions. We talked about flexibility and adaptability, being observing, questioning, self-monitoring, using active listening, being open-minded and using collaborative thinking, which it sounds like a lot of you are doing already, suspending judgments, and then recognizing that the complexity of all this. This really is quite complex. I mean, we had an hour and a half really to cover a lot of material, and there's so much more. I mean, we really are scratching the surface. We could take one of these and do a whole semester on it. So start changing yourself if you want to change the lives around you. And then actually, we're going to go around the room briefly, and I'm going to choose one person to complete one of these statements.